Welcome to the first episode of Nittany Sports Now's Victory Again podcast. I'm Joe Smeltzer. Joining me is Brandon Walker, two writers for Nittany Sports Now. This is the first of what we hope will be many podcast episodes, and we're definitely excited. We're recording this on a Monday night, and in 5 days, Penn State will be playing Auburn at Jordan Hare Stadium for the first time ever. It's a big game, and we'll certainly talk about it on this episode, but Brandon, before we get into that, let's kind of briefly summarize Penn State's 46-10 home opening win over Ohio this past Saturday. The Nittany Lions were supposed to beat Ohio, and they certainly took care of business.
They did. One thing I talked about when it talked about on the podcast, I don't know if you was able to. You was at the stadium. I was at the crib chilling, watching it. True freshmen. And they were saying it all game long that Cam Miller, Winston, and Abdul Carter, Danny Davis Sutton. It was like all over the defense. And Amari Evans scored a touchdown from
first catch too.
Yeah, and then you got Singleton that was just beasting out there all day. And then the other guy, Katron Allen, had nice runs, nice catches. So if they're ready to step up, Ohio State and Michigan will have to watch out. If they're ready to step up like they did today, I know they're playing against Ohio, but it is what it is. You have to play in front of you, but we'll see what these freshmen can do heading into the Plains.
Absolutely, and you can read our coverage of Penn State's Ohio game if you haven't already on Nittany Sports Now, but Penn State's not going to win by 36 this week. They might win, but I think there's a pretty good chance Penn State does win, but it's going to be a much bigger challenge than Ohio was, Brandon, as you mentioned earlier. I'm not sure how much of Auburn you've gone to see this season over the past 2 weeks, but just based off what you know about Auburn, what are some of your thoughts and early takeaways as Penn State heads into this matchup?
All right. We talked about a lot of good. If there's some bad, and there's going to be a problem. That offensive line for Penn State versus the defensive line of Auburn. You got Marcus Harris and Derek Hall, the two defensive tackles. They could cause trouble. Penn State gave up 5 sacks last week to Ohio. If you already saw the keys to the game for me, Ohio, you're supposed to dominate that type of team. These are maybe 2-star recruits. Maybe you might have a 3-star in there, but you're supposed to dominate. You're going against high 3s, bare minimum when you play against Auburn. 4 stars, maybe a couple 5-star. I haven't looked at their 24/7 ratings, but it's just the key to the game. You got to block these guys up front, and then you got to stop the run, which they are capable of doing. Bigsby that you spoke about, he had 102 yards and 2 touchdowns last season. And you got another guy named Jaquiz Hunter who had success running last year against Penn State too, and he's had 75 yards this season.
Yeah, you mentioned Tank Bigsby, and I definitely want to talk about him. He's a guy that rushed for around 800 yards, more than 800 yards actually, as a true freshman. Then last season, he broke 1,000 yards and gave Penn State a lot of problems in that whiteout game. Obviously, Penn State won that game 28-20, but Tank Bigsby went off. He rushed 23 times, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I think if Auburn's going to have a chance, Tank Bigsby has to get going, because TJ Finley, with all due respect, he has not been a great quarterback this year. In fact, I don't even think you could say he's been a good quarterback. They've played 2 opponents, Mercer and San Jose State, and TJ Finley's thrown 1 touchdown pass and 3 interceptions. That pretty much tells you all you need to know. And I just think Penn State's defensive front is going to be tested in a way that it hasn't really been tested. Purdue hates to run the ball, even when they have to chew the clock. Ohio is Ohio. We talked about them a little bit, but Bigsby is a beast, and he lives up to his Tank nickname. And I think that's a guy that Penn State's going to have to stop or at least neutralize to have a great chance to win this game. Because if Tank Bigsby goes off, then Penn State could be in trouble with that added to the road atmosphere, the heat, and whatever factors Penn State might have going against it Saturday.
It is heat. It is supposed to, I don't know what the game time temperature is. We'll look at that up as we go along. We'll get that information. But yeah, the heat, the atmosphere, that like the running the ball, like them being tested, stopping the run. But it's nice to have a rotation on that defensive line. You got Isaac coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Mustafa's coming back. You got Beeman coming back. I mean, I think Mustafa played during the last game, right? That was before he got. Okay, he did. Well, he's going to be there. Beeman's going to be there. You got Chop Robinson, the freshman, Denny Davis Sutton. You have Kevon Willie. You have depth pieces up front that you can rotate in and out. But I'm not worried about the defense. This is one state. If he gets to the second level, it's how there's linebackers: Sutherland, King, Elston,
Curtis Jacobs.
Yeah, Curtis Jake. How is the second level going to handle once he gets in that level? Will he be able to make tackles on a consistent basis? Because that's the supposed weak spot of Penn State's defense, supposedly. So that's going to be their test.
Yeah, Penn State has some injury problems on the defensive line as well. Keziah Izzard and Smith Vilbert, Izzard is a defensive tackle, got a lot of playing time last year, became a starter last year after PJ Mustafa went down. Vilbert's a guy that played very well in the Outback Bowl on the defensive end. Neither guy is going to start this season, barring injuries to God forbid, another injury to Mustafa or an injury to one of Penn State's defensive ends. But both were pretty big depth pieces, and both were guys that Penn State definitely wants to have back and ready for week 3. We mentioned the weather real quick. Saturday, by game time, 3:30, it's supposed to be 83 degrees and mostly sunny. So nothing, definitely a little bit hot, but nothing too bad. Certainly not what Alabama could be in September. So
definitely, but yeah, it's just like I can't get a prediction. You'll get that probably Friday when I do the Walker's Keys to victory. So I have to do a little bit of research, but I can't give a prediction right this second. But just doing a little digging, I think Penn State has the advantage. They have a little bit better talent, and then Auburn's Auburn because the coach Brian Harsin said we don't even know if he's going to be coaching next year. Like it's always the year when it comes to Auburn and their coaches.
No, we didn't know if he'd be coaching this year. Going back to
right. Yeah, it was touch and go. So either they're going to come out firing and prove that. I mean, Harsin's going to come out firing and prove this is the type of game that he needs to win. If he can't beat Alabama, or LSU or Georgia, who's on their schedule. Penn State is, I'm not going to say an easy opponent, but Penn State will be a good notch on your belt to help you keep your job.
Yeah, especially with Penn State being ranked now. They weren't ranked either the first 2 weeks of the season. Or I should say they weren't ranked in the preseason or after week 1, but they're ranked after week 2. And I definitely agree with that Auburn's going to come out firing. It's definitely one of their biggest home games of the season. And I'll pull up their schedule real quick, but they don't have Alabama at home this year. No Iron Bowl. They're playing Georgia on the road, I think. But even getting away from the SEC teams, it doesn't have a big game feel to me. It is a big game, but it doesn't have that big game feel that you would get from Penn State, Ohio State, or Penn State, Michigan, or in Auburn's case from Auburn, Alabama, or Auburn, Georgia. As much as it's unique, we've never seen it before. In Auburn, we saw it at Penn State last year. That was the first time these two teams met in the regular season. But with Penn State not being in an SEC stadium, I don't think since 2010 at Alabama, and never being in Jordan-Hare Stadium at all, and on Auburn's side, never hosting Penn State, I think I don't know. It just feels more like a novelty, more something that's unique than it does a big game the way Penn State and Michigan might feel, if that makes any sense.
You think so you're saying you think it's kind of a spectacle.
Oh, yeah. That's a good word for it.
Because college game, I would have bet after Appalachian State beat Texas A&M, I knew that wasn't going to make Miami versus Texas A&M wasn't going to make college game day. That was going to be scrapped. I thought the next choice was going to be Auburn because for the game, but they were like, no, they went to Appalachian State themselves.
Yeah, App State stole game day from Texas A&M pretty much.
Basically. And from Auburn. I thought it would have been, I was like, all right. I was waiting to see the announcement they was gonna get the game, but didn't happen. So it's a novelty game. It doesn't. We'll just see. But bottom line is, going back, it's an important game for Auburn too, as well as Penn State, and for Sean Clifford too. I'll explain that in a second once we really get down to it. But how do you feel? Oh, but matter of fact, we should get to it. When do you think Aller will start permanently? Do you think that happens this year?
No. Unless Clifford gets hurt and we have another situation like we had against Iowa in 2021. Obviously, we all know what happened there with Taquan Roberson coming in, not doing the job, Penn State losing, Clifford still playing, but not being fully healthy for at least the next game against Illinois. And for all we know, maybe he wasn't healthy the rest of the season. There's definitely evidence that suggests that he wasn't. But I think the only way that Drew Aller could start is if Sean Clifford's hurt. I think Sean Clifford will play well enough to keep the starting job. And I just don't think there's too much of a need to rush Aller. As good as he's been, he was very good against Purdue in a limited sample, even better, I think, against Ohio. But with it being Clifford's 6th year, he didn't come back to sit on the bench. And I know performance is the most important thing, but Clifford definitely has pull, I think, being a 6-year guy. And the only way I think a player with Clifford's experience and what he's sacrificed to do at Penn State, the only way that guy sees the bench is if he's not getting the job done. And frankly, I believe Sean Clifford will get the job done. And as long as he's getting the job done, then there's really no need to rush Drew Aller into the picture before next year, I don't think. So
I just wanted to know that, see what you got your input of. I was like, you know what? Say he struggles Saturday. You were up at that stadium, you were up at Purdue, you watched the tweet, you watched that. I was like, one guy was like, the guy from Fox was like, who was announcing the game? I think it was Joe Klatt.
Yep.
He was like, if you've been there too long, it means you weren't good enough to leave. That, and that, I was like, that hit me. I was like, he has a point there.
Yeah, that's a point, but
that's a big point. I'm like, but
I also think just because players aren't great, won't be good NFL quarterbacks, which I don't think Clifford projects as an NFL quarterback right now, but they could be good college players without translating to the NFL. I see that argument, but I don't know if it really means anything as far as like what Sean Clifford is or isn't capable of. So
right. I think they're just like, they want their pro quarterback, and Aller, in my opinion, is probably going to go. I'm going to make a bold prediction. It's probably not. I'm thinking in 2025, he'll be the number 1 overall pick.
Could be. He definitely has that level of talent. So, and yeah, because it would be 25. He's probably going to leave. If he's as good as advertised, he'll leave after his 3rd year whenever he's eligible. So, but I definitely see him as a 1st-round pick. I don't know about number 1 overall, but I definitely could see that happening. Then again, we thought that about Christian Hackenberg how many years ago. It didn't play out that way, but I think Aller's going to be better than Christian Hackenberg, and I think when he gets going, he's going to be better than what Sean Clifford has been at Penn State. But that doesn't mean he should start this year. But
you're right. That's a good point. But I'm just saying, man, Man, that's a talent, right? I just love talented quarterbacks. But I understand your point saying because Clifford probably knows how to win this Auburn game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. He knows how to win this game this Saturday. Allen will probably get there, but not Saturday.
Right. So talking about Auburn, if as a Penn State fan, I would be concerned that Auburn struggled against San Jose State because that could be a wake-up call for them. You know, you play San Jose State and Auburn definitely played down to its competition, no question. They were in trouble that game, eventually pulled out a 24-16 win. But if I'm a Penn State fan, I would rather have Auburn blow San Jose State away, maybe get a little more confidence instead of struggling and then coming in. They're already going to be fired up for Penn State, but even more fired up, perhaps, being that they had a chance to dominate a team last week and didn't dominate and instead struggled in an unimpressive win.
You make a point there, but I think Auburn has been struggling for the past few years. Like, it's not just I forget they did get upset not too long ago, like a couple years ago against the team. I gotta look it up, but there was a reason why Gus Malzahn got ran out of there. There's a reason why they're running these guys. It just seems like something is missing. It's just like I don't know if Alabama's in their head, the Iron Bowl, but it's just a point of getting past the middle hurdle. I just don't think something's right. I think something in the water is not right at Auburn. It's always the coaches or the athletic program when it comes to the football program. I'm sorry I'm like tripping over words, but point is, I think that it's their dysfunction. It's just their dysfunction right now.
Yeah, and they had a whole offseason of turmoil, and Bo Nix left, obviously. Tank Bigsby almost left. He was in the transfer portal, ended up staying at Auburn. But when your quarterback and number one running back, when one of them leaves and the other one almost does, that's not good. And I don't think that speaks well for the program. I don't think it speaks well for Brian Harsin, who I think was a horrible hire. And that's even going back to when the hire was made. I don't think that really made sense at all. And that has proven to not be very effective thus far. He is 8-7 as a head coach, 6-7 last year. But what's interesting about this game is that there isn't a team that really has nothing to lose. If you're Penn State, and you lose this game, you lose to a team that you were favored to beat. They are favored. The lines have been released, and Penn State is a field goal favorite at this point. You lose the game you're favored to beat. You fall out of the rankings, right? And of course, any game you lose, with the exception of maybe a team that's obviously superior, like Ohio State, any game that James Franklin loses, people are going to be calling for his head. And with how the past 2 years have gone, Penn State, obviously, the running joke among non-Penn State fans is that they've been 11-11, and Penn State players and fans and coaches, and they're definitely frustrated to be 11-11. But the fact that they've been 11-11, that just puts every loss in a microscope. It means there aren't any moral victories, even in games like Michigan and Ohio State. So, and then on Auburn's side, Auburn was kind of the SEC's version of Penn State last year, I think. Both teams started well. Penn State was 5-0. Auburn started 6-2. And both finished poorly. Penn State finished 7-6. Auburn finished 6-7. Both had very winnable games. In Penn State's case, 2 games. They should have won at Iowa. They definitely beat Iowa, I think, if Sean Clifford doesn't get hurt. And you could argue they should have beat Michigan at home. They were one defensive stop away from beating Michigan. And in Auburn's case, Auburn should have beat Alabama. All it needed was a first down, and it wins the Iron Bowl and knocks Alabama out of the playoff. But it didn't happen that way, and Alabama beats Auburn. Michigan beats Penn State. Both teams go to the playoff. But my main point from all of that is that, in a lot of big games, there's one team that has nothing to lose, another team that has a lot to lose. But in this case, both teams, I think, have a lot to lose, and that's what makes this matchup another thing that makes this matchup very compelling to me.
Yeah, like I know we ain't trying to talk about recruiting, but with James Franklin, but there's a lot of guys in the South is going to be watching this game.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of their recruits. I'm not going to name. We ain't going to name no names. Put their names out there, but we watch 20. We do 24/7 rivals all 3. There's a lot of people. The South is calling. They're trying to get some of the Penn State's recruits. I mean, and that's why that's one of the reasons why it's important for them to win this game, because they can prove that they can play against teams in the South much less, and also like obviously Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State, and it's probably another reason, and it's important for Sean Clifford too, because we just talked about him not being maybe not being a pro style quarterback. Who did everybody say that about last year?
Kenny Pickett.
Penny Pickett. Exactly where I'm going. Where he made his name, made his bones, he went to an SEC stadium and showed out. Then the stuff started talking about Heisman this, Heisman, and all this stuff. And then he's a first-round draft. I'm not suggesting he's going to be a first-round draft pick. But scouts are watching. That could be him being a 5th-round pick to a 2nd-round pick in April draft. We ain't trying to talk about draft and all that stuff over here, but
yep.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think Penn State already having a big test at Purdue to open the season is absolutely huge going into this game. Auburn hasn't been tested yet. They played Mercer. They played San Jose State. Penn State, okay, yeah, they had that cupcake game against Ohio, but that Purdue game could have easily, and some people will say, probably more than some people, a lot of people would say, should have been a loss. So much could have went wrong in that game. You're playing a good Purdue team on the road, opening the season. Jeff Brom's trying to, they have a good program. Jeff Brom's trying to push out even further to be one of the Big Ten's best. Had a 6-year quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, that played pretty well. And it was under a microscope, under the lights. Thursday Night Football. It's not a Saturday game where there's a million options to watch. It was the highest rated program on network television, second highest rated program on network television, next to Big Brother. So the most watched college football game of that night, more watched by more people even than the Backyard Brawl was, Pitt, West Virginia. And it could have gone wrong in a million ways for Penn State, and almost did, obviously, Clifford with that awful pick 6. But Sean Clifford led a game-winning drive, a clutch game-winning drive, probably the best drive of his Penn State career to this point. In fact, I don't even think there's any doubt about it. But Penn State went on the road on a game that a lot of people are going to be watching, and Auburn's going to be the same way. It's going to be probably the game in the 3:30 time slots, SEC on CBS. That's always a big deal. And a lot of people are going to have eyes on Penn State, and Penn State this year has the experience of playing in that type of situation. That's just TV. Forget, even add in the hostile environment at Purdue with the blackout, the hostile environment with the orange out that's coming at Auburn. Penn State's went through a lot in that week 1 game against Purdue, and Auburn hasn't really had that type of test. And I think that's where Penn State has an advantage coming in here, is that they've been battle tested. So
they played lined up with people with at eye level. You get what I'm saying? Their offensive linemen lined up against people that could dog walk them if they ain't careful. So yeah, Mercer San Jose State, yeah, they should maul those teams, but I don't know what the Mercer score was, but they didn't maul San Jose State. So we'll see. We'll see on Saturday what they do.
We will see. And as we kind of wrap this up here, let's talk about our main key to the game. I have 2 main keys that kind of go hand in hand. I talked about Tank Bigsby earlier, and I'm not going to add on too much to that. His nickname is Tank for a reason. He's a beast. He gave Penn State problems last year. He's given a lot of teams problems, and he could be a big problem. And if Auburn's going to win, I think they're going to have to ride Tank Bigsby. And I know I kind of talked down on TJ Finley earlier on Auburn's quarterback, but He's a guy that can be annoying would be the word for it. He's not a guy that's going to go in and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, especially not on this Penn State secondary, which might be one of the best the school's ever had. Not going to happen. But what he can do is he can use his legs and he can exploit a weakness that Penn State has. And that's that Penn State doesn't really have a proven Mike linebacker. And by the same token, I don't know if they have a proven spy either. Finley's not a guy that's done a lot with his legs. And I want to give a shout out to a guy on Twitter today that responded to a tweet I sent about Tank Bigsby. The account is at DanHep1. He wrote that he's concerned about what Finley can do with his legs because of that reason. Penn State not being proven at the Mike linebacker position thus far. Neither Tyler Elson or Kobe King has a lot of experience. You know, Jonathan Sutherland has played well, but he's moving into a new position. Curtis Jacobs could be a spy, but Penn State might need him in coverage since he's their best coverage linebacker. Jair Brown kind of the same way. Jair Brown told reporters after Saturday's game that he loves when Manny Diaz uses him as a Mike linebacker in his defense. But then again, you use Jair Brown up front and you take away your main takeaway threat in the secondary. Brown tied for the nation's lead in interceptions last year. So Finley probably isn't as confident in his arm as a lot of quarterbacks have. 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions against Mercer and San Jose State will do that. But with that lack of confidence could create, a more necessity to use his legs. And if he uses that and Penn State doesn't have an adequate spy, he could break off some runs and cause a problem for Penn State. And that's a point that Dan brought up on Twitter too. So shout out to him again. But I don't know, Brandon, we'll talk about Tank Bigsby a lot, but TJ Finley is a guy that I don't think is very good, but he's a guy that could be kind of a nuisance for Penn State, if that makes sense.
Yeah, now I didn't know because he's a mobile quarterback. He uses his legs if he wants to. That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. And plus, they have another quarterback, Robert Ashford. They haven't even announced who their starter is for this weekend. So, what we're going to guess is Finley. So, that is a good point. That could be a difference. They need to see if they can have a spy and figure that out. Because you're not going to count on Abdul Carter to be the spy.
You could, but that's putting a lot of faith in a true freshman that's 3 games and really in Carter's case 2 games in because of that ejection.
Right. So, man, that's a good point. I think another good point is, like I said, we're going to beat this down. Offensive line versus the defensive line versus for Penn State.
Yep.
They have to block those guys up front. You can't get away with 5 sacks against Auburn. And then I think I'm sorry. We talked about you got to start Nick Singleton. He's your best. I
agree.
We all see that. We all know the drill by now. Who your top 2 backs are? The 2 freshmen. I know they like to be with Kevon Lee. I interviewed him during media today. Nice guy, good kid. Come on, you got to ride them too. And you know what? I think Singleton's going to have another big game. He's going to have his breakout performance.
Right. I think, you got to start Nick Singleton. I don't even know how much you need to use Katron Allen. Katron Allen is a good back. He's a 4-star for a reason. He played at a very good school, IMG. He's a guy that could do good things for Penn State down the road, but he's not at the level Nick Singleton is, at least not right now. I think Allen could be useful on those 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1 situations. Have him be your short yardage back and have that be his identity because Penn State couldn't pick up first downs nearly as much as it should have on those short situations. Have Allen be that role, but have Singleton establish him as your bell cow. Going back, it makes me think, and you'll hear Singleton and Saquon Barkley mentioned in the same sentence a lot. But going back, Saquon Barkley had a very good backup in Miles Sanders. But Penn State understood how good Saquon was, understood that he needed to be the bell cow, and kind of pushed Miles Sanders to the side. And then when Barkley declared for the draft, Miles Sanders was ready to take over. It's not exactly the same situation. because Sanders was a year later than Barkley, and Barkley had already established himself by the time Sanders got to Penn State, whereas Singleton and Allen are in the same class, came up the same time. But Nick Singleton is definitely your 1A, and I don't think it needs to be a 1A, 1B type of thing with him and Katron Allen. I think Singleton is 1A and Allen is number 2. And Kevon Lee is going to be in the transfer portal. So
no, that's what I mean. Like, that's what I said. I didn't say that they're your 2 best backs.
Right, they are.
This is number one. What do you think about his? I don't know how many freshman running backs. What do you think about his Heisman chances?
I'm not going to go there yet.
I mean, in the future, and like maybe next year.
For the future,
yeah, like
we'll have to see. I mean, it's hard to predict because Saquon never won the Heisman. Other great players, Larry Johnson didn't win the Heisman at Penn State. So only one player in the history of Penn State football, John Capoletti, has had that honor. So it's too early for both Singleton and Aller, for that matter, to think about Heisman. But I'm not going to rule it out. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
But
I'm not walking back that if he shows out, he's going to be the number 1 pick in 2025. I am not walking that back.
You don't need to walk it back. There's definitely reason to believe that, especially with, how the draft loves its quarterbacks and how big quarterbacks are. And, especially considering that Aller, even before he got to Penn State, has been drawing comparisons to Josh Allen. And Josh Allen's a guy that could win a few MVPs down the road. We saw it Thursday night against the Rams, Bills-Rams. We all know how good Josh Allen is. And if Drew Aller is anywhere close to that, NFL teams are going to be happy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, all right, I think, do you have anything else to add, Brandon, before we kind of wrap this up?
No, just follow me at BWalkerTheDawn on Twitter. We will have more content for Nittany Sports Now sometime this week. I'll probably be talking about Sean Clifford and how important this game really is and discuss it in depth. But other than that, no.
All right. I'll add to that. Follow my account at Joe Smeltzer 775, and then our site's account, Nittany Sports Now at Nittany SN. All right. Joe Smeltzer, Brandon Walker, Nittany Sports Now. This has been a good first episode of the Victory Again podcast, and we look forward to more content in the future, both in podcast form and in written form on the site.